I know they almost can't help themselves. You know, it's just it just pulls at them and pulls at them. You know.
They can solve every other issue in their life when they choose to, and this one's no different. Especially if you've been behind bars, and he hasn't been for a while. It's been almost a year since he was released.
Oh, that's pretty good for not going back quicker than that.
But you just got to decide.
Yeah, so
And people do it every day.
As
They
much
do it every day.
energy as they're putting into going around and getting the next handout or whatever, if they would be working.
Yeah. All right. We're in 21 verse 22. Y'all remember Abimelech? That's who Abraham showed up with Sarah and pawned her off as his sister again.
Oh, sir.
Yeah. Let's see what Miss Billy wants. She probably wanted to know for having class. Hey, Miss Billy. Okay. Yeah. 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 Okay. Well, look, I'm in the middle of my class, but I'm going to share that with everybody. And that's okay. I'll call you back when I'm done. Bye-bye. That's Miss Billy, her neighbor, Charles Poland's brother.
Yeah.
Has cancer bad. They just had to take him to the emergency room. He's got a bad infection. So I want to pray for him.
Yeah, you mentioned that this morning.
Yeah.
What about Tiffany's mom?
She passed.
She did pass today?
She passed this morning during worship.
Tiffany.
Watson. I used to know her from Judson.
Yeah, she was Secretary of Judson, but she's Patsy's niece-in-law.
Is
And she
that
had-
the one that was in there with E. coli?
Well, yeah. A stroke-induced E. coli. Coli induced a stroke, I think, or something. I don't even know really what.
It's crazy.
Yeah, because
How it
Betsy was
happened.
telling me last week that
She
that
was
was
sick.
she heard about me and then she heard about her, and she said that's the second time in years and years that I've heard the word E. coli.
Yeah.
And she said she had become septic and was.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
never. She passed out and was on the floor. I think without any oxygen really for almost a day.
Before
Oh,
the family found it.
goodness.
Yeah. So we're sad about that and for that whole family.
And then they tried to marry their daughter, so in between all this, she
Yeah.
told her daughter to pick out her wedding dress.
Yeah. So it's very surreal
Yes.
time in their life.
That's so sad.
Okay, so we're back to Abimelech. It says, at that time Abimelech, accompanied by Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, God is with you in everything you do. So this is a testimony statement here. He's noticed that even when Abraham is making mistakes, God is still there, following through with the promises that He's made to Abraham, and that's a real man. It's nice to know that's part of God's character, huh? That we can make mistakes and He's still with us and is working us through it. So He says, swear to me by God here and now that you will not break an agreement with me or my children and descendants. As I have been loyal to you, so you will be loyal to me and to the country where you are a resident alien. So he was living there in Abimelech's land, and he's looking for an agreement. He's looking to the future and saying, boy, if this guy ever feels like he's can take control around here, he will. So I'm going to use our good friendship now, the camaraderie we share, to establish a covenant. And Abraham says, I swear it. But Abraham complained to Abimelech because of the well that Abimelech's servants had seized. Abimelech replied, I don't know who did this thing. You didn't report anything to me, so I hadn't heard about it until today. So way back when, Abraham dug a well so that he could water his flock. This was when he was first coming into the territory, and now it's become a place of conflict. So the well rightfully belongs to the one that dug it. So he says, Abraham took flocks and herds and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. Abraham separated 7 ewe lambs from the flock, and Abimelech said to Abraham, "Why have you separated these 7 ewe lambs?" And he replied, "You are to accept the 7 ewe lambs from me, so that this act will serve as my witness that I dug this well." So he needs a witness to say this was Abraham's well that he dug. So 7, a significant number again in the Hebrew text. It means that this is the perfect arrangement that we're reaching here. Okay, and the ewe lambs allow for the covenant to continue. Okay, if it would have been the male lambs, at some point they may have been slaughtered, this, that, the other. Ewe lambs have kids and they keep going from generation to generation. So that's what he's doing here, and this will serve as my witness. Therefore, this place was called Beersheba. Okay, so what does it mean? Beersheba means the well of the oath, or 7 wells, because 7 ewes. Okay, so the well of the oath. So even the name is saying that there is a witness to this that establishes this covenant, because it was there that the two of them swore an oath. After they had made a covenant at Beersheba, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of the army, left and returned to the land of the Philistines. So if you want to look at the map, Beersheba lies close to where you see Hebron there, the wilderness of Ziph. Okay, I don't see Beersheba on that map.
Philistia is over here.
Yeah, and Philistia is on the other side. So he left and went back. So this is a large territory that they're talking about right now. So it says Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba. Now we've talked about trees before as we've gone through this, and the significance of trees, all the way from the garden and the trees of the knowledge of good and evil, and the trees, the tree of life, and there's been numerous ones. The tree at Mamre, the oak tree at Mamre, and this is the second time we've come across the tamarisk tree, and it becomes kind of a witness tree for Abraham. When he wants to remember what's happened in a place, he plants a tamarisk tree, or there's a tamarisk tree there. So he planted the tamarisk tree at Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. That's the first time we've heard that name for God. So we keep, as we move through the Abraham story, we keep discovering names that that Abraham relates to God. And everlasting is important because the covenant is to be everlasting. So the covenant is not being made just simply between two men. The everlasting God is bearing witness with the covenant as well. And Abraham lived as an alien in the land of the Philistines for many days.
Beersheba is down from Hebron.
Yes, how far? It's a pretty good ways. I guess maybe.
It's down at the bottom.
Oh yeah, so you're like 30, 40 miles below where I was looking. I need to get a good map.
What is the Hebrew for everlasting God? Does it have
Let's see. Let's see what the
Is it
see what the word is there. Olam, forever.
Elohim? Is that
Elohim.
Elohim. I
That's
knew
how you would say. Yeah, I guess it
Yeah.
would be not Elohim, but
Yeah.
Elohim.
I knew there was the God, everlasting God, Elohim.
a long time, future time, times to come. So it really it tunes to when God gives Moses his name. I will be what I will be. I'm the everlasting one. Or I am who I am. Or I am what I am. Yeah.
And I want the great I am to do this.
Yeah.
I am can do this, and I am can do that. Please, God.
All right, so after these things, so this is a time after, we don't know how long after, God tested Abraham. So here, we haven't had a test, have we?
Well, we don't know that God tested him as worded, but he has had tests where he's failed.
Yeah. So here we have something new. This is God saying, all right, I've reached a point with Abraham where it's time to take the test. And it's a pass-fail test. It's not a graded test. This is the real deal kind of test. This is like you're going to jump out of the plane and test to see if the parachute's going to open kind of test. So he says, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. So he's got this thing going on. And Abraham says, here I am. All right, so open communication, open relationship. He says, take your son, he said, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about.
You're breaking up, God. You're breaking up.
Yeah. Wait, you said something about...
What'd you say?
What was that? So, we begin to think about this. This is just straightforward command from God. There's no nuance. This is just straightforward. And then everything that Abraham does beyond this is not so necessarily straightforward. He's having to deal with the servants and Isaac and the whole situation in kind of a cloaked deal because he's not. Why would he do that? How could he have been comfortable with this? How could he have been comfortable with God now telling him, here's the child of the promise? We've been dealing with this child of the promise now for 7 chapters. And now all of a sudden God is saying, hey, listen, I want you to sacrifice him, burn him. When we read this, we read past it because it is so matter of fact. And I just kind of have to sit here for a minute and imagine Abraham at this point. All that he has gone through.
Yeah, and what are you doing, Lord? You told me that he was going to be the seed. He
Yeah.
was going to be my future.
And the writers just reminded us he's an alien in this land. He has nothing but this promise. And so here we are with him, and finally we have a level of empathy that nearly brings us to tears, really, that he's asking to take his son's life as an
Ishmael
offering
is
to
gone
God.
By this point.
Oh yeah,
You can't
Ishmael's
go
gone.
back to Ishmael.
No, Ishmael's already gone. His mother's found him a wife in Egypt.
Yeah.
This is it. There's no plan B here
No.
at all for Abraham. And what's amazing about it is that there's no talkback anymore. Remember all the talkback that Abraham would
Yeah.
give earlier? Well, what about this and what about that? And you haven't done this and you haven't done that.
Let's negotiate.
And
Yeah.
now we don't have any of that. The next line is, so Abraham got up early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took with him 2 of his young men and his son Isaac. There's no conversation. There's no explanation. There's none of that going on now with Abraham. You finally begin to get this glimpse of Abraham that his character is becoming God's character. That when God says something, you don't flinch, because God doesn't flinch. And we're going to live according to what his plan is for life, his promises. So he hasn't flinched. So it says Abraham split the wood for a burnt offering and set it out to go to the place God had told him about, this place Moriah. On the 3rd day, dun, dun, dun. Okay, just pay attention. Got to have that 3rd day. He's there with 3 young men on the 3rd day. Abraham looked up and saw the place in a distance. Then Abraham said to the young men, stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there to worship. Then we'll come back to you. Now, God's already told him, you're going to sacrifice. So what is Abraham? What would you, when you read that, what are you thinking? So either Abraham's just covering up the truth.
Yeah, we know the end of the story.
Yeah.
But
At this point,
it's like, okay, I've got to keep these guys
Yeah.
away from me, or like I said, not.
That's
They
right.
must have thought he was nuts and
Yeah,
trying
we're
to
going to
stop
stop you
him.
from doing this.
Well,
yeah.
he don't have a sacrifice. He's going to worship, but they also recognize, like Isaac does, where's the animal for the sacrifice? You know, they had to notice that too.
Yeah.
And when he's telling them, we'll come back,
Yeah.
they've either got they're assuming, okay, they'll be back. And Abraham is saying, oh, we'll be back, only it won't be we that come back. That's what he really is thinking. Or maybe he has it in his heart to believe that God still has something else here
It's going to provide.
because he's done it before.
God's not going to take this promise that he
Yeah.
promised me,
Yeah.
his son.
So in this line, we begin to think maybe Abraham does understand that this is a test, or maybe he is just so sold out to the character of God that he knows that God will act in a way to bring about his promise. That he believes so much that Isaac is the promise, that there's no way he's coming back without him. I think that's what it is. I think there's this thing that, as the New Testament says, even if he had done it, God would have raised him back to life. There's this thing about it that says God is not going to break his promise, no matter what and how we find ourselves interacting with it. He's going to do his thing because it's his character to do it.
Well, that's like in further into stories and stuff. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You know, we're not going to worship your gods.
Right.
We're not going to bow down.
That's right.
You know, he'll save us if you throw
You're,
us in the fire.
that's right.
Even
You're the
if
king,
he does
but
it,
that's right.
even if he does it, we're still not going to do what
That's
you're
right.
asking us to do because it's wrong about what we believe about our God.
Yep. So Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. So now he's the wood bearer. He's the eights bearer. Remember the word eights for wood. And now we're seeing it. It's going from, we were introduced in Genesis to the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And we've worked our way here to this tree that this young boy is carrying for his own sacrifice. We can't escape the tree, which just paves the way to the cross every
Yeah, I was
time.
gonna say,
It just
yeah,
paves
it's
the
our
way.
tree, yeah.
You can't get away from it.
That's
He
like
is the
that
tree.
song Billy Graham's ministry did, that mercy tree, whatever, one of his last year before he went to heaven, he did that one evangelistic push. I had it
Yeah.
in my house, that's the only reason I know. 'Cause I had all these kids come over and they showed the mercy tree.
Yeah.
It's like, even now, you're not going to get away from this.
No. So he laid it on his son, and in his hand he took the fire and the knife, and the two of them walked on together. Then Isaac spoke up to his father, Abraham, and said, "My father." And he replied, "Here I am, my son." So this term, "here I am," becomes it becomes the way that the writer uses to say, well, yeah, we're here together and we're on the same page. We're communicating. Okay, so here I am, my son. And Isaac says, the fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham answered him, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. Then the two of them walked together. So we have a little bit more insight into how he's using the term we with the two men. He's saying that I've got nothing to do with the sacrifice. This is God's sacrifice. This is God's business that he's about here. This is the child of the promise. So it's his child, it's his promise. Okay, and everything that I am, because I have nothing in this world, is wrapped up in this child, and I'm going to leave it to God to do what he's going to do. Now we're talking about faith that goes beyond anything that we've witnessed in the 22 short chapters that we've been in Genesis. So when they arrived at the place that God had told him about, Abraham built the altar there and arranged the wood. He bound his son Isaac and placed him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out and took the knife to slaughter his son. What is such a graphic word. He's not killing him, he's slaughtering him.
I always remember the pictures from Sunday school as a little girl with the
coming down with
the
the knife.
knife up, and then you
Yeah,
see the
right.
child just laying there, and how Isaac had to obey his father. Because he would have been big enough to say, you ain't tying me up and putting me on this altar, old man.
That's right.
And he could have tackled him and probably knocked him out and
Yeah.
ran down the mountain if he wanted to.
Yeah.
But
That's
even
right.
Isaac was obedient.
So what we have in Isaac is exactly what Abraham's to be to God. So Abraham, we really look at this. Isaac in his actions, or maybe even his inactions, is instructing his father. Who else does that? Jesus does. He didn't make a sound, like a lamb to the slaughter. So, so Jesus follows the example set by his forefather Isaac, whom we rarely talk about. Of all the patriarchs, Isaac seems to be the one that gets the least press.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
you got Abraham,
Isaac
you got
and
Jacob,
but you
but
always hear about the front.
he needed a better press agent or something. We just don't know a lot about him, but what we do know about him is profound,
Yes.
and it really begins here.
Do you think that Isaac maybe trusted him enough or had faith in his father enough because Abraham had kind of probably told him of his life and his faith in God?
And how much had he lived with him though, too?
Yeah.
And he saw it all.
And
He was
I
a
think
boy.
when his father told him God's going to provide the sacrifice, he believed it,
Yeah.
and rightfully so believed it. And then when he was tied up, maybe he also believed it. Well, I'm the sacrifice, but he doesn't say a word.
Right.
And this is the foreshadowing that Isaiah looks to. He looks back and he looks forward. He looks back at Isaac and he looks forward to Christ. And so we find in this, that's a span of 2,000 years almost, we find that what's the character of God in this? Okay, there's an obedience before God that not only demands our full surrender, it demands our silence. That we don't have a say in it. That's some of what I was trying to say this morning. Elijah wanted to have too much of a say in what happened because it hadn't turned out the way he wanted it.
So then he's like, I'm done with this.
Yeah, just let me die.
Just let me go.
And a pointless death at that point.
Yeah.
This death would have had great meaning. He's offering his son as a sacrifice of worship. Okay, and let's just take for a moment, had God allowed it to happen, and let's say he had allowed it and he raised him to life, how would we approach it differently? How would we approach God differently?
We would be so afraid of him because we know he's going to kill us dead and then maybe raise us.
That's right.
We would be so afraid.
That's right. What did Isaac do to earn, to be raised from life? He would have done nothing. He was already a sinner. Okay, so it couldn't have worked that way. There's only one that could have been offered in death and raised to life. See, and so we're left. The reader is just tuning in on all this stuff. See, that's going on because they know how important worship is. They know how important the sacrifice is. They know how important the promise is. And so all of this is about to happen. And then what happens? Here we have one of these suddenly moments again with God. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And what does he say? Here I am. Communication is intact. Here I am. Then he says, do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your only son from me. Now that is a remarkable thing. When you hear it that said, an angel from heaven saying to him, I know now that your understanding, your relationship with God, the courage that it takes to live that life, it's all out in full view now, which is what God always wanted to see and to know of you. And you just want everybody to have that kind of life, to have that kind of courage before God to just surrender and risk everything because he's God. And he said, I want that. And we've never lived in that world. And we never will live in that world until we are able to see him face to face. But here Abraham, in his whole reality of life, he kind of brings it all together in this one thing. And the angel affirms it in a way that you can't walk past. This is exactly what God wanted of his man. So Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in place of his son.
And I've heard, and I don't want to backtrack, but he looked up, so he'd already gone to his knees and fallen on his face after his name was called.
Yeah.
Because for him to look up, to be caught in the thicket, he had to be on the ground.
Yeah.
So he was already worshiping.
Yeah, totally spent. I mean, this is a spent moment where you know that everything is poured out to God. Yeah. So he says, and Abraham named that place, the Lord will provide.
Now, isn't that Jehovah Jireh?
I think it is. I'm going to tell you right now. Yeah. Yeah, the Lord will provide. Jehovah Jireh. But it also means to see and to understand. So in this passage in the Hebrew, we see, the word see, or the concept of seeing, over a dozen times. Okay? And also, when he plants the tamarisk tree earlier, it's the tree that sees. It's the tree that bears witness to what has happened there. And so we have this wonderful thing. Who else said there's a God who sees? Hagar. And so now we have both families, so to speak, understanding that God is always awake, and he's always seeing, and he's always paying attention. Unlike what Elijah was saying about the Baals in chapter 18, he must be asleep. Maybe he went for a walk.
Yeah,
he does. Maybe he's relieving himself. Yeah, he was letting them have it. Because it said it will be provided on the Lord's mountain. So he provides, but God provides because he sees. He's always paying attention to our lives with him. Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, "By myself I have sworn." This is the Lord's declaration. So the angel is declaring for the Lord this declaration. "Because you have done this thing and have not withheld your only son, I will indeed bless you and make your offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky and the sands on the seashore." We've heard that before, right? Here's a new one. "Your offspring will possess the city gates of your enemies." First time we've heard this. This is a new part of the promise. Okay, so Abraham, there's going to be enemies that are going to come against you. No worries. You're going to possess them. You're going to possess their cities. Meaning that the city gates means what? You will be determining the fate. You will be making a decision. You're the boss.
Yeah.
So what's he speaking of here? This is Christ coming in a real sense. Now, a good Old Testament scholar would say you can't jump that far. But the one who decides the life of his enemies is the victor.
And weren't they in kind of our modern day judges that always
Yes.
sat there?
Yeah. So we have one
So
judge.
even if you don't want to jump to Jesus, he's
Yeah.
the ultimate judge that's sitting at the gate and still.
Paul had no trouble declaring that Jesus was the descendant of Abraham. So I have no trouble declaring it here that this is what that means.
Yeah, he is going to.
And
Yeah.
the tamarisk tree. I didn't know what it looked like.
Oh
You know
yeah.
what it was like? Tree. And it like blooms
And
too.
almost-
It's a blooming tree.
Wow. Kind of looks like a weeping willow.
And the broom tree is a lot like the tamarisk tree. That they may be the same.
That's kind of in the desert.
Yeah.
They almost look like a pine tree, sort of long needles on it, sort of.
Probably some kind of scrub cedar or something like that.
Something like that.
Then it says in 18, "And all the nations of the earth will be blessed by your offspring because you have obeyed my command." That's the old command. So sandwiched in the middle there is this new thing about your people are going to be the judges over your enemies. Doesn't mean you conquer them. It means more like what Micah describes, where they're all going to flood to the mountain. and they're all going to seek out the counsel of the Lord, and everyone's going to live under their own vine and their own fig tree. Okay, where does all this happen? Mount Moriah. Where is Mount Moriah located? Anybody know?
Isn't that the middle of Israel?
That's where the city of David was located.
Temple or something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Everything takes place at Mount Moriah.
So yeah, and next door neighbor to Mount Moriah is Salem. Okay, so here we have all these fantastic things that happen early on in God's work.
You need to go on to Israel.
I don't want to go someday. I'll never
We need
afford
to
to
work
go.
that out for our pastor.
I just want to go.
And I will
but-
jump in his luggage.
Okay, so we got through that episode, and there's probably so much more there, but that's as far as we're going to go without ripping into a lot of language, I think. But I did want to point out the thing about seeing, because God providing by seeing is an important thing. It's not just something that happened by accident, is the point of the Word. The Word is telling us that God was observing, He was watching, He was waiting to see what would happen, and He provided what He needed to bring about the fulfillment of His promise. Then, now after these things, Abraham was told, Milcah also has borne sons to your brother Nahor. So here we remember Nahor a long time ago in a land far, far away. Uz, his firstborn, his brother Buzz. That was an interesting place to live back then. Kemuel, I thought southern names were bad. The father, here's the father of Aram, which causes problems for a long time. Chesed, Hazo, Fildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. And Bethuel fathered Rebekah. Okay? Milcah bore these 8 to Nahor, Abraham's brother. His concubine, who was named Rumah, also bore Teba, Gaham, Tahash, and Makkah. So, big family. There's those 8, and then there's these by the concubine. But we're most concerned with Bethuel because that's the father of Rebekah. In fact, the only reason why any of this is mentioned, so that we understand Rebekah's family tree. Yeah. All right. So, because that becomes important to the story. Now, Sarah lived 127 years. These were all the years of her life. She didn't get any extra. It was just 127. I found it interesting. That's how they write that. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, and that is Hebron. So look on the map up there at Hebron. They've moved north from Beersheba. You see where it is there? Wilderness of Ziph.
Yeah, it's
So
closer to the Dead Sea.
he's wandering around. What's the reason for moving? Got to have good pasture. So that's what they're doing. They're moving up the wadi, and between the Dead Sea and the wadi there is green pasture.
Yeah, that's what
And,
you talked about wadi this morning, didn't you?
Yeah, and a wadi is just it's usually a dry riverbed that in the rainy season fills with water. Okay, and so this morning it was a drought, and Elijah had called for a drought, but there was still water in the wadi. And so God said, you go there and drink the water, and I'll feed you. And he does until the water dries up. And then God really started showing off after that. It says, when Abraham got up from beside his dead wife, he spoke to the Hethites, obviously, who were in the land. I am an alien residing among you. Give me a burial property among you so that I can bury my dead. Now let's just sit there for a minute. He's an alien because the land has not been given to him, but to his ancestor. I mean, to his descendants. Okay, so this is something interesting. Abraham recognizes that the promise that God has made of the land doesn't belong to him; it belongs to his offspring. So he treats the promise with respect, knowing good and well that there's going to be a day where they're going to possess this. Okay? But in order to do things right, really in order to in a way to show extravagance, because he could have demanded, my God, whom you don't serve and know nothing about, has given me this land, and I've got an army to take it. He doesn't do any of those things. Because we look at the second half of the blessing, or the second half of the command of God to be a blessing, you can't be a blessing and go around being a bully. So he's also tuned in on the blessing part of this. I am able to do something that is going to reflect the character and nature of God. I'm willing to purchase something I already own. That's got the cross written all over it too. Okay. So the Hethites reply to Abraham, and here's this long dialogue here. Listen to us, my Lord. You are a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in our finest burial place. None of us will withhold from you his burial place for burying your dead. And then Abraham goes on. He rose and bowed down to the Hethites, the people of the land. He said to them, if you are willing for me to bury my dead, listen to me and ask Ephron, son of Zohar, on my behalf to give me the cave of Machpelah that belongs to him. It is at the end of his field. Let him give it to me in your presence for the full price as a burial property. Now, the bones of your ancestors were as precious as anything. He was not going to leave to chance that this was ever going to be desecrated because he didn't own it. It was important for him to own this little, some say 17 acre, I don't know how they come up with that from this, but this little 17 acre plot of land. But he was insisted that his those that died were going to be on land that God had promised without any doubt whatsoever. So that's what he did.
They gave them 17 acres because when you buried one of the family, then they wanted to bury others of the family with them.
Well, yeah, this became like this the family cemetery. Yeah.
Why
But
did the bones matter so much then? You know, me and my mother-in-law had this conversation many times at the end of her life.
yeah,
She was so against cremation.
yeah.
But because of the bones that mattered in Scripture.
Yeah, I think in Scripture it was a way of ancestral respect. You could never forget your ancestors if they were in a box over by the fire.
That's what they are in Jerusalem. They're all
Yeah.
bones
Yeah.
or whatever. They're all in boxes.
Well, they're called sarcophagus. And when they left Egypt, they had Joseph's bones in a box that they carried with them, and they did that all over the
All their
place.
ancestors.
Yeah, I guess it was.
So it was just because I'm just wondering how we've lost that through the years.
Yeah, well, we have cemeteries that we go to. That's got a marker. You don't have to worry about it.
I know we do, but even now in my lifetime, you're hearing more cremations and nobody putting anything anywhere. One, I know it's a financial thing now. You know.
And that's the
They
main
don't
reason.
really talk about that. They don't really say anything against cremation, do they, in the Word?
That's,
I didn't
that's
think
what,
they
yeah,
did.
No.
I didn't either. So
Yeah.
I just found it interesting. Like
No.
I said, they took the bones with them, whereas we put them in a place, and of course we have them marked.
Yeah,
But for it to be, he bought the property so that he could always have it, and like our cemetery should always be there. Once we set a piece of land, it's never going to be anything for cemetery.
right.
Because it's a
Right.
cemetery and it wouldn't be
Yeah.
desecrated.
Well, today's cemeteries create a lot of problems. Just go to Felder's and you'll find out.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Nobody owns it. Nobody's responsible for it.
Well, and then
The
you
state
hear
won't
some
take it over.
places where they desecrated like Indian burial places.
Yeah.
It's been so many hundreds of years, and they just
Yeah.
wiped out the burial.
Yeah.
You can hear the ghost stories of all that, but I mean,
Well,
it's
and my
just interesting.
my
to me.
sister-in-law had told me that she's from the Philippines, and I think around there, unless you buy a box, a thing to intern your bones in, or the cremated remains in, unless you buy that, you can rent a place, you can rent a box. But after I think 5 years, she said, somebody else can rent it, and they'll just take whatever you have in there and just throw it out. And they'll replace
Yeah.
it with whoever wants to rent it.
Yeah.
But they have places that you can buy
Later buy if you want
and
to
own, and you can put because she's planning on taking Wayne with her, his cremated remains, when she goes back to Philippines, and she's planning on being with him, buried with him. like in that box. Yeah, her
I'm
kids.
just curious as to the bone situation.
Yeah, I've never really looked into it so much, but just that it is it's a thing where
Well, then Joseph too, he told them, "Don't leave me."
don't leave
So
me
they were
without my
honoring
bone.
his final wishes.
Yeah.
I can understand him because it was his request.
Right.
I don't want to stay.
Right.
Because it was Egypt.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
he
I
was
know the
saying
reason
he-
why.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I understand the Joseph taken when they were
Yeah.
delivered, but I just all the thousands of years later, you know.
I'll have to ask
Yeah.
Amber if she knows anything about
Yeah, she might.
bone-wise, if she knows any bit about that.
It may have been a cultural thing
Yeah.
in that area, so arid that you could probably, this sounds terrible, you could probably decay a body and it not take, well, I would think it might take longer. It's a lot to think about there as to why they do it the way they do it. But it's so hot, maybe. I'm just trying to think.
Goes into a place. That's why it's called the bone eaters.
Yeah.
And then they take the bones because whenever however long it takes body, they put because those boxes aren't this big. Where the body boxers.
Oh no, the bone boxes are small.
Yeah.
You
and
just,
so you know
just
that-
lay them
you
in
know
there.
They decayed somewhere.
Yeah.
And then they put them in the
Yeah,
final,
that's right.
what we call the final resting place.
Yeah.
You know, so there is a two-step process. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking,
Well, yeah, they kind of
whose
have to get
job?
on.
Whose job is it to go? I guess they know. I would not even want to go into it. But I guess they wait plenty long enough for it's nothing
Well,
to
that's
go on.
just-
I don't, unless
Yeah.
they
We don't want to go because we've cleaned up death so much. We don't have to experience it like
Because Amber has
we have to
been-
experience it
they put 'em in
otherwise.
these big
Well, because
vats.
we embalmed and we never. I mean, it's like 100 years before these are. I mean,
Yeah.
It's a long
Rod,
time.
yeah,
before
Rod's
they
like, you
arrive.
don't even want to be around a mausoleum where all that juices start flowing. That just that grosses me out. But
I had a friend in Alexandria who's really rich, and he says I will give anybody $100 to explain to me the value of a cemetery. He said I'll give you $100 if you can make the case for me that they're a valuable part of the human experience.
Yeah.
But he said you're not going to be able to. He said it's the biggest waste of real estate, the biggest waste of time, biggest waste of money.
So
said
what
you
does
pay
he do
perpetu-
with his dead loved ones?
Oh, what's he? They were all cremated.
Yeah.
He was cremated.
And
He
then-
didn't see any point in.
And then just pour the ashes over wherever. or
Yeah, he didn't
over.
care after that. He didn't care. He
But
does it
the
matter?
cemetery, yeah.
Jimmy was like, just throw me in a ditch. I don't
Yeah.
care. That's my body.
Yeah.
I'm done with it.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not.
God's
that's
got a
against
new
the law.
God's got a new one ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, that's enough of that. Yeah, we could. But I'll look up on some of that.
No, I'm just,
No, I'm curious now.
Yeah.
It had to be a cultural thing of the day,
Right.
and it had to have something to do
It
with
has
generational
value
connection.
Because God put it in His Word.
Yeah, there's a generational connection that I think
Yeah.
is being maintained there.
And they wanted
Um,
to be in the land that God was saying was theirs too, because that's where they was taking Joseph to.
Right. Mhm.
So verse 10, Ephraim was sitting among the Hittites. He's there, the guy he's trying to buy it from. So in the hearing of all the Hittites who came to the city gate of his city, Ephraim the Hittite answered Abraham, "No, my lord, listen to me." And back and forth. "I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the sight of my people. Bury your dead." But Abraham's got something else to say. He bowed down. They're all bowing to each other, but Abraham most certainly is bowing. He bowed down to the people of the land. Great humility here, and says to Ephron in the hearing of all the people of the land, "Listen to me, if you please. Let me pay the price of the field. Accept it from me, and let me bury my dead there." Ephron answered Abraham and said to him, "My lord, listen to me. A land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Bury your dead." So Abraham agreed with Ephron, and Abraham weighed out to Ephron the silver that he had agreed to in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 standard shekels of silver. So finally, Abraham's able to buy this cave the way he wanted to for 400 shekels of silver. So Ephron's field at Machpelah, near Mamre, the field with its cave and all the trees anywhere within the boundaries of the field, became Abraham's possession in the sight of all the Hittites who came to the gate of the city. After this, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field at Machpelah, near Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So we got a pretty good idea where this is. The field with its cave passed from the Hittites to Abraham as a burial property. So you remember before that whenever they start repeating things over and over again in the Old Testament, it's to make a point. And the point here is Abraham has gone and bent over backwards to ensure that the land of the promise was going to be it's going to be respected for the dead, not just for the future, but also for the past. So there's an extension of God's promise forward, and there's the extension of it backwards. And Sarah is testimony to that by her bones being in the land where God has promised. Okay, now a wife for Isaac. We want to go ahead. We got a little time here. Abraham was now getting old. Are you kidding me? Now getting old? That's
100-year-old child.
I'm surprised you hadn't laid young yet. Like, you like to take me, God.
Yeah, that's such an ambitious now. Abraham is now old. Getting old in years. 100-something years old. And the Lord had blessed him in everything. Abraham said to his servant, the elder of his household who managed all he owned, place your hand under my thigh, and I will have you swear by the Lord, God of heaven and God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I live, but will go to my land and my family to take a wife for my son Isaac. Okay, so the whole thing with the hand under the thigh is saying that I'm going to allow me to be in the most vulnerable position with you, and you're gonna make a vow to me. Okay, so that's what he does. He wants to.
So where is his country? He's got to go back to Ur. He's got to go all the way back to Ur.
Yeah, all the way north. Yeah, yeah.
Even though he's been living all this time.
All this time in his other country. Okay, so now see this follows on the heels of Sarah and being buried. So this generational and family connection we're seeing is quite important. He could have taken him, a wife, but it wouldn't have been the right thing to do. It wouldn't have been family. It wouldn't have been contained within the promise. Yeah. Although God never says.
Right, but he had to go all the way to Ur.
Had to go all the way up there, yeah. That's practically to Turkey. That's where he goes. The servant said to him, suppose the woman is unwilling to follow me to this land, because that's a long way off. Should I have your son go back to the land you came from? And Abraham answered him, make sure that you don't take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from my native land, who spoke to me and swore to me, I will give this land to your offspring. He will send his angel before you, and you can take a wife from my son from there. So what's Abraham's fear here? Don't take my son back there. God's made the promise. Two things could happen. Isaac decided, man, I like it here. I'm never going back. And that destroys the promise. The other thing is that relatives can begin to think, Abram's pretty rich. How about we just keep Isaac and we'll keep everything that Abraham has? You can't live forever. Lord, he's already 130-something years old.
Yeah.
So there's some things going on here where he's being very practical, but also the practicality of it is built around the promise. This is the land that belongs to him. So you mustn't ever let him leave here. And he says, an angel of the Lord is going to go before you. So this is not anything that God's told him. This is a statement of confidence that God has already prepared for all of this. And he doesn't have to worry about it. That God's angel is going to take care of everything. So it's kind of like later when we get into the histories, a lot of things happen where God's not, like the book of Esther even, where God's not speaking a lot and not spoken of a lot, but you know that he's in control and got things going on. I think this is the same kind of attitude toward God. There's a deep sense of trust now and faith in God.
Abraham now is just totally dependent and obedient to him.
Yeah.
He's there.
Yeah, he's like whole hog, not like the chicken, not just the egg. He got the ham in too. So he says, if the woman is unwilling to follow you, then you are free from this oath to me, but don't let my son go back there. Meaning that I would rather him have to marry someone from here than take the risk of leaving the land of promise. So you've heard me say this before, probably in different areas, but now we're seeing in this whole section, geography and genealogy are become very important to the whole rest of the story that we're part of. It begins with Abraham and his offspring being a blessing to all the nations. So we get this real sense of genealogy, but also they have a geographical connection to a place that God is providing them and has promised them. So from here on, we've been introduced to it slightly with the bones of Sarah having a resting place. That's genealogy. And now we're being reminded that there's an aspect of geography here too that has to be honored in order for God's program to work. So the servant placed his hand under his master Abraham's thigh and swore an oath to him concerning this matter. The servant took 10 of his master's camels, and with all kinds of his master's goods in hand, he went to Aram, I don't know how to say that word, Naharaim, to Nahor's town. So let's see where that is. What in the world does that word mean?
Mine says Mesopotamia.
Yeah, that's up there. It's above where Babylon would be. I can't get my...
What did you
there it
say
is.
again? You couldn't say it without...
It means the Aram of two rivers. So the Tigris and the Euphrates come together. The land in between, I think, is what is called that Aram. It's the area bounded by the upper Euphrates and the Haber River. So, I wonder if I got a map I can use.
Northwestern part of Mesopotamia, the city of Nahor.
Yeah.
Probably to be identified with.
So Mesopotamia is the region between the Tigris and the Euphrates. So this in that what is called the Fertile Crescent, a very rich and prosperous area of the world. Okay. Which is where he's going to. At evening, the time when the women went out to draw water, he made the camels kneel beside the well outside the town. So in verse 10 to 11, there's not a lot of time that's designated there, but there sure took a lot of time. He took 10 of his camels, and all of a sudden he's in the town, Nahor's hometown, and he kneels down the camels beside the well outside of town. So the Lord God said, Lord God of my master Abraham, he prayed. We haven't heard anybody else pray to God in this whole adventure with Abraham until now. Lord God of my master Abraham, he prayed, make this happen for me today because I am tired. It's been a long... and show kindness to my master Abraham. I am standing here at the spring. Anybody remember what the spring represents? It always represents life and new life and fertility and something good's about to happen. I'm standing here at the spring where the daughters of the men of the town are coming out to draw water. Let the girl to whom I say, please lower your water jug so that I may drink, and who responds, drink, and I will water your camels also. Let her be the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master. Now, when I read this, I think, what a generic response. I mean, how many women are going to be out there and you're going to say, hey, will you water my camels? Well, sure. Let me get some water. But we're led to believe this very mundane and simple thing, okay, holds all the keys. Okay, because Isaac has to have a wife so that the promise can be fulfilled too. So this very simple thing that he asked for, really almost a mundane thing, he's asking God to use in a spectacular way. And so that's what happens. Before he had finished speaking, there was Rebekah. So we have this whole, it's like the suddenly, and in a moment, and right away we see all this, and right here before he gets even through praying, God has provided his answer to his prayer. He said, before he's finished speaking, there was Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, coming with a jug on her shoulders. Now the girl was very beautiful, a virgin. No man had been intimate with her. She sat down, she went down to the spring, filled her jug, and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, please let me have a little water from your jug. And she replied, drink, my lord. She quickly lowered her jug to her hand and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I'll also draw water for your camels until they've had enough to drink. Bingo, bing, all the bells start going off, fireworks shoot. This is the one. Yeah, big arrow. That's her. So she quickly emptied her jug into the trough and hurried to the well. You got to pick up on all these words. Quickly, hurried. All of this has happened with great energy and excitement. There's an exuberance going on here. She's eager to be Isaac's wife, and she doesn't even know it yet because of her activity. Okay? That's what all of this is communicating. She's just so, this is just perfect. Yeah.
In silence.
Yeah. So she drew water for all the camels while the man silently watched her to see whether or not the Lord had made his journey a success. So he's watching. He's observing. This is a pretty good catch right here. It's exactly what I asked God to do. She's doing, and she's beautiful to boot. So as the camels finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing a half shekel, and for her wrist 2 bracelets weighing 10 shekels of gold. Whose daughter are you? He asked. Please tell me, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? I don't know who the us is.
It must have been with
His entourage.
He must have had an entourage to be traveling that far with 10 camels.
Yes.
And so she answered him, I'm the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. She also said to him, we have plenty of straw and feed and a place to spend the night. Everything is working out perfect. Then the man, yeah, look what he does next. Then the man knelt low and worshiped the Lord. He has seen, all right, he prayed to the God of his master, and now he's worshiping that God on his own, no master around. He is really experiencing the full-blown measure of how God makes happen what he's doing. And he worships him and said, blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not withheld his kindness and faithfulness from my master. As for me, the Lord has led me on the journey to the house of my master's relative. So everything that Abraham had asked has come true too. Yeah. And the words here are significant because he uses 2 great words, kindness and faithfulness. So what an amazing thing to see in the midst of all this that's happening, that the thing that comes to mind in his worship is what a kind and faithful God that Abraham has.
Mine says steadfast love.
Yeah, because it's that word hesed that we use. The faithfulness, the root there is firmness or trustworthiness. Can't budge it. It's good. It's good forever. And as for me, he's so happy that he's been able to fulfill his master's request. The girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now Rebekah had a brother named Laban, and Laban ran out to the man at the spring as soon as he had seen the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrist. And when he had heard his sister Rebekah's words, this man said this to me. He went to the man He was standing there by the camels at the spring. So Laban is interjecting himself into this thing. And why is he doing it? He saw the gold. Okay. Another reason why, the contrast here as we move through this section is this. Abimelech wanted no gold, but Abraham insisted that he pay him for what he wanted to honor his wife and those that would follow in death. Laban's looking for gold, and so there's a reason why we begin to see maybe there's another reason why Abraham didn't want his son around these folks. Maybe they're not as honest as things seems to be. So he said, "Come, you who are blessed by the Lord. Why are you standing out here? I have prepared the house and a place for the camels." So the man came to the house, and the camels were unloaded. Straw and feed were given to the camels, and water was brought to wash his feet and the feet of the men with him. A meal was set before him, but he said, "I will not eat until I have said what I have to say." So Laban said, "Please speak." He said, "I'm Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, and he has become rich. He has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male and female slaves, donkeys and camel. Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master in her old age, and has given him everything he owns. My master put me under this oath: you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites who live in the land, in whose land I live, but will go to my father's family and to my clan to take a wife for my son. But I said to my master, suppose the woman would not come back with me. And he said, the Lord before whom I have walked will send an angel with you and make your journey a success. And you will take a wife for my son, and may your clan and from my clan and from my father's family. Now I ran by where he says, the Lord before whom I have walked. So we see a significant identification there that Abraham didn't share the first time when we had this narrative, but now we hear it here. We recall Enoch, he walked with God. We recall Noah, he walked with God. And now we're seeing that Abraham has a like relationship where it wasn't mentioned in our conversation with the servant, but the servant wants Laban's family to know that my master walks with the Lord. You've got all these things that he mentions about his wealth, and it has everything to mention about the promise, but now this is also important. He walks with the Lord, and he sent his angel to prepare for this. Then you will see, it says, then you will be free from my oath. If you go to my family and they do not give her to you, you will be free of my oath. Today when I came to the spring, I prayed, Lord, and this whole chapter is just repetition. God of my master Abraham, if only you will make my journey successful. I'm standing here at the spring. Let this young woman, you remember the repetition? This is word for word of what he said a while ago. And he said, before I had finished praying silently, there was Rebecca, bam, coming up with her jug on her shoulder. And she went down to the spring and drew water. So I said to her, please let me have a drink. So she's the life giver in all of this. She's providing the drink. Everything that's going to be fulfilled in the promise. Rebecca's going to be there because she's going to bear the children. So she quickly lowered her jug from her shoulder and said, drink. And I'll water your camels also. So I drank. And she also watered the camels. So there's just life flowing everywhere. There's just an abundance here. Then I asked her, whose daughter are you? And she responded, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor, whom Michael bore to him. So I put a ring on her nose. I never thought about it being a nose earlier. I just remember the ring. And the bracelets on her wrist. Then I knelt low and worshiped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who guided me on the right way to take the granddaughter of my master's brother for his son. For his son. So I love that line too. I bless the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who guided me on the right way. It certainly was not an accident. He'd been trained well. Now, if you're going to show kindness and faithfulness to my master, now he's using the same words that he described God as being. Now he's asking for his relatives to show the same kindness and faithfulness. Tell me, if not, tell me, and I will go elsewhere. So Laban and Bethuel answered, this is from the Lord. We have no choice in the matter. Rebekah is here in front of you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of my master's son, just as the Lord has spoken. So now all of a sudden we see that they understand they don't have a choice in this matter either. God has put all this in place.
Yeah,
it's
he's
obvious.
Talking about God this whole time, and so they're saying now, well, God told you to do this. We're not going to interfere.
Yeah.
We're going to do whatever God told you to do.
That's right. The angel of the Lord's gone before. Everything that you prayed about has come true. It's driven you to the place of worship. And Rebekah is just animated about the whole thing. She's just so eager. And that's what comes across here.
All this gold dripping off her body. I want to see this man.
Yeah.
I get to leave this place and go to somewhere
I might
else.
not have to be going in the sun and getting all this water.
So when Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed to the ground before the Lord. This is the third time he's worshipped. Then he brought out objects of silver, gold, and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious gifts to her brother and her mother. Then he and the men with him ate and drank and spent the night. When they got up in the morning, he said, send me to my master. But her brother and mother said, let the girl stay with us for about 10 days, then she can go. Dun, dun, dun. All right. The foreshadowing between Abimelech's generosity toward Abraham and this family's kind of wishy-washiness is becoming clear. It says, but he responded to them, do not delay me, since the Lord has made my journey a success. Send me away so that I may go to my master. So they said, let's call the girl and ask her opinion. Wait a minute. Nobody ever asked the girl's opinion. Not in this culture.
No.
So you know there's something up. They called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? And she replied, I will go. So they sent her away with their sister Rebekah. So they sent away their sister Rebekah with the one who had nursed and raised her, and Abraham's servant and his men. They blessed Rebekah, saying to her, our sister, may you become thousands upon 10,000s. May your offspring possess the city gates of their enemies. Bam. So their prayer for her is the same thing that God has promised.
Yeah, they don't even know.
Yeah, they don't even know how prophetic their words are. Then Rebekah and her female servants got up, mounted the camels, and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and left. On their way home. Now, from 61 to 62, it's like space travel. We don't know nothing that happens between Hebron and the Fertile Crescent. Yeah, we're back.
We're back in the promise.
Yeah. So Isaac was returning. Now Isaac was returning from Beer. Let's see what this word means. He's returning from the watering place. Oh, wait. She's coming from a watering place, and he's returning from a watering place.
Ooh.
Okay. So, for he was living in the Negev, so he's down in the desert, and there's a watering place there. And so he's just hanging out with the source of life, and she's coming from the source of life. Everything is right. Okay. In the early evening, Isaac went out to walk in the field, and looking up, he saw camels coming. Rebekah looked up, and when she saw Isaac, she got down from her camel and asked the servant, who is that man in the field coming to meet us? And the servant answered, it is my master. So she took her veil and covered her face. Then the servant Isaac Then the servant told Isaac everything he had done. Thank goodness they didn't say it again, huh? You're kind of waiting for it to, here it comes again. But we've heard it 3 times. And Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah and took Rebekah to be his wife. And Isaac loved her, and he was comforted her after his mother's death. So there's a weird ending to this.
I was fixing to say, Sarah's dead, but they still have Sarah's tent.
Yeah. So what's
Maybe
going
they had, maybe it's not that long after she died.
Yeah, so he's been depressed over his mother's death.
Yeah. He's feeling comforted because there's a woman back in the house.
Yeah.
And Isaac, well, we find out later, the whole Rebecca scene with Jacob and Esau.
Twins,
She kind of
acts like Sarah.
overbearing,
Acts
maybe,
like
to her
Sarah.
husband. And maybe he's kind of he's a gentle soul. He's kind of a mama's boy, maybe. I'm
Yeah,
sure that he
sounds like
was.
he
I'm sure Sarah really worked him over since that was the one promised, and she had run off one son so she could have the one in her house.
Yeah.
You see some culmination that's unspoken in the story, but now you don't have to read too much between the lines, okay, to see. It's Sarah's tent. She's been memorialized. They're calling it Sarah's tent, even though after she's dead. And he's comforted since his mother's death, meaning that he was a mama's boy, and now he's got someone to kind of take care of him and pamper him and do that kind of thing. So why is this included at the end of the story? Okay, because it sets us up for something that happens much later. We begin the stage is set for Rebecca to kind of become the boss. And we have to hang on to that. When we get to the whole Jacob and Esau story, the readers of this day would look back and say, see, yeah, now we know why she's like this. This is, I just turned that off. That's a bad cable. So that's kind of where this is taking us. Isaac really needs to be cared for, which is not a bad thing. It's just that it kind of plays into what God has coming later. And we understand later that, oh yeah, this is really how it had to be.
God creates us all and gives us
Yeah.
our personalities. And so if he
Yeah.
was a gentle soul and a mama's boy, that's who God was
Yeah.
created to be.
Yeah.
You know?
The key to this, as we look at it, is the first line. Isaac loved her. And that's separated linguistically from the other things. The first and foremost is that he loved her. And so we build on that as we move through. We find out that he also trusted her. And then she kind of misappropriated his love and trust later. But all that had to happen because God had ordained some things that had to happen.
And she
So-
was excited about seeing him too.
Yeah.
Who is that coming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she
must-
immediately knew that was the one she wanted to marry because she hid her face.
Yeah.
She didn't want him to see her face until after the wedding. So there is no wedding ceremony. We're just brought him into the tent, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we did a lot.
Yeah.
Lots a lot.
That was good.
By whoever's
It's
watching.
hard to believe we're getting to the end of Abraham.
I know. Well, 2 people watched for 5 minutes.
Bathsheba.